Article 2, Obstruction of Congress. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In his conduct of the office of the President of the United States and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States and, to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald J. Trump has directed the unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of subpoenas issued by the House of Representatives.
The change did not announce itself with drama. There was no single vote that captured the nation's attention, no televised showdown, no moment that looked like the end of a presidency. Instead, it unfolded quietly through filings, constitutional language, and procedures rarely discussed outside legal circles. While the public was pulled from one headline to the next, something far more consequential was happening behind the scenes. Lawmakers were re-engaging Article 2 of the Constitution not as an abstract concept, but as a live mechanism of restraint. This wasn't about messaging or spectacle. It was about activating the most serious safeguard the system has when it believes the presidency itself may be crossing dangerous lines. Impeachment resolutions are often dismissed as political theater, but that misunderstands their purpose. They are formal legal accusations, written in precise language, designed to establish a record. When Congress files them, it is saying plainly that alleged conduct rises beyond disagreement and into constitutional violation. What's unfolding now is not removal, not a trial, and not a verdict. But it is groundwork. Multiple impeachment resolutions have been formally introduced in the House, each invoking Article 2, Section 4, the clause reserved for moments when a presidency is viewed as a threat to the constitutional order itself. These filings matter because they preserve evidence, outline alleged abuses, and demonstrate that Congress recognized the danger while it was still unfolding. One of the most consequential filings emerged in April 2025, when Representative Al Green introduced a sweeping impeachment resolution containing 7 separate articles. Each article addresses a distinct category of alleged misconduct, ranging from obstruction of justice and abuse of spending authority to corruption, constitutional violations, and ultimately, tyranny. Taken together, they do not describe a single controversy or policy dispute. They present a pattern, a presidency that repeatedly tests constitutional limits, bypasses oversight, and treats legal constraints as obstacles rather than obligations. At the core of these impeachment articles is not an argument about unpopular decisions, but a claim that fundamental guardrails have been repeatedly ignored. Obstruction of justice stands out as one of the most serious allegations, not because it is dramatic, but because it strikes at the survival of the rule of law itself. A system cannot function if a president interferes with investigations, pressures witnesses, undermines prosecutors, or signals that loyalty matters more than legality. This is why obstruction formed the backbone of the case against Richard Nixon. When accountability mechanisms are compromised from the top, the law no longer applies equally, and the entire structure begins to collapse inward. Equally significant is the allegation that congressional authority over federal spending has been systematically challenged. The Constitution assigns the power of the purse to Congress for a reason. Control over money is control over governance. When a president redirects funds, delays appropriated spending, or invokes emergency powers to override legislative intent, it is not merely aggressive leadership. It is a direct confrontation with the separation of powers. The resolution argues that such actions were not isolated but repeated, reflecting a view of executive authority that treats congressional approval as optional rather than mandatory. Foreign policy and trade authority form another fault line. While presidents possess broad discretion in international affairs, that discretion is not unlimited. Congress retains authority over declarations of war, trade regulation, and economic sanctions. When military actions are initiated without authorization, when trade policy is reshaped through unilateral emergency declarations, or when international leverage is wielded without statutory grounding, it raises profound constitutional concerns. The filings describe a presidency that acts first and forces the legislative branch to react later, eroding the balance the founders deliberately designed. The First Amendment allegations move the issue from institutional conflict to democratic risk. Criticism of the press is not impeachable, but the use of government power to intimidate media outlets, threaten regulatory retaliation, or chill dissent crosses a constitutional boundary. The presidency carries immense influence, and when that influence is weaponized against free expression, it undermines the public's ability to hold power accountable. The resolution argues that this conduct, taken in context, reflects a pattern of attempting to suppress opposition rather than engage it within democratic norms. Unauthorized executive offices may sound technical, but they represent a dangerous concentration of power. Congress creates agencies and defines their scope precisely to prevent unchecked authority. When a president constructs parallel structures or shadow operations without legislative approval, it weakens oversight and normalizes executive expansion beyond constitutional limits. The allegations of bribery and corruption cut even deeper. Article 2 explicitly lists bribery as an impeachable offense because it erodes public trust at its core. Claims that official power was used for personal benefit or influenced by outside interests are not matters of optics. They strike at the legitimacy of governance itself. And then there is the final article, tyranny, not as rhetoric, but as a legal concept rooted in the accumulation of power, the defiance of lawful constraints, and the erosion of accountability. Historically, tyranny is not defined by personality, but by conduct. It emerges when courts are ignored, Congress is sidelined, and democratic institutions are treated as inconveniences rather than partners. The resolution argues that when viewed collectively, these actions form a pattern that the Constitution was specifically designed to confront. What makes this moment especially consequential is that impeachment is unfolding not as spectacle, but as structure. There has been no dramatic vote, no televised showdown, no instant resolution, yet the constitutional machinery is quietly engaging. Impeachment is not removal by itself. It is an accusation grounded in law. The House files charges, the Senate judges them, and the bar for conviction is deliberately high, because the founders wanted stability without surrendering accountability. Right now, these articles sit on the congressional record, waiting. That alone carries weight. They preserve evidence, establish legal narratives, and signal to courts, historians, and future lawmakers that concerns were recognized and documented while power was still being exercised. Political control matters here. As long as the House remains in Republican hands, these resolutions will not advance. But elections alter constitutional reality overnight. A shift in control transforms dormant filings into active proceedings, unlocking subpoena power, hearings, sworn testimony, and public exposure of evidence. Even without removal, the process itself reshapes a presidency. It drains authority, fractures alliances, and replaces the image of dominance with one of legal vulnerability. History shows that presidents do not fall solely because of votes. They fall when legitimacy erodes and support collapses under sustained scrutiny. Beyond impeachment, the conversation has expanded to include the 25th Amendment, a mechanism designed for incapacity rather than misconduct. Its invocation would require action by the Vice President and Cabinet, followed by congressional confirmation, making it politically explosive and unlikely. Yet the fact that it is being discussed at all reflects the depth of institutional concern. Courts issuing warnings, judges blocking executive actions, markets reacting to instability, and allies questioning reliability are all signals of systemic stress. These are different branches and institutions responding in different ways to perceived overreach. Zoomed out, this is not one scandal or one vote. It is a prolonged test of constitutional design. Article 2 exists as a final safeguard when other restraints begin to fail. Whether it is ultimately used depends on elections, evidence, public awareness, and political courage. But its serious invocation tells us something essential. Lawmakers believe the risk is real. They believe the guardrails are under pressure, and they are choosing to respond within the system rather than abandon it. Even if removal never happens, the record remains. Future presidents will study this period to see what happens when boundaries are pushed and whether consequences follow. This is why the moment matters beyond any individual. It is about whether power still answers to law, whether restraint still exists, and whether the Constitution functions as a living safeguard rather than a symbolic document. Constitutional crises rarely arrive as explosions. They arrive as paperwork, filings, procedures, and resistance that feels quiet until history looks back and recognizes its weight. If you want to understand where this is heading before it becomes undeniable, stay with this channel. Subscribe, engage, and share this analysis, because the patterns are already visible, but only if you're paying attention while they're forming.